Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all well. In today's video I wanted to talk a little bit about EDS, which is Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, and I wanted to talk about some myths and some facts about EDS. So there are a lot of myths that go around, whether that's in the medical community or just in the general public, and I thought it might be helpful to just kind of talk about a few of those myths and talk about what the actual facts are regarding that myth. If you don't know what EDS or Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome is, it is something that I have. It's a genetic condition that affects the collagen in your body, and it has all sorts of symptoms. I won't go into it now because some of it I'll address in the video, but I have also made some other EDS videos that kind of talk a little bit more about how it affects you, so I will link the playlist down below so that you can check that out and find out a little bit more about it. But yeah, I thought I would just, I've done a bit of research, but also stuff that I have heard from that people have said, and I thought I would just tell you what the myth is and then tell you what the facts are, so that hopefully there's a little bit more understanding about it. And if you're kind of not diagnosed yet, or you're not quite sure about what kind of EDS encompasses and things like that, or if you've got a friend with EDS, it might just help you to understand a little bit more about what goes on with it, how it affects people. So the first myth that I hear quite a lot about EDS is that EDS isn't painful, and this is definitely a myth in the majority, I would say. Yes, some people have EDS and they don't experience chronic pain, but a lot of people with EDS do experience pain. It's pretty widespread pain as far as I'm concerned. So I get pain in my muscles, in my joints, and then I also get pain from other illnesses that are related to my EDS. So things like digestive pain, pain in my chest, headaches, all sorts of random pains and things like that. So yeah, generally I don't know why people think EDS isn't painful. Maybe it's just because they don't understand what it is, or they think it's like a certain thing, they have a sort of set view about it, but in the vast majority of people that I know with EDS, it can cause some sort of pain, be that sort of minor sort of pain or very, very severe pain. So the next myth that I hear a lot about EDS is that people with EDS are just a bit bendy, and this is definitely a massive stereotype about Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, because if you kind of talk to anybody that kind of doesn't have EDS, and they'll say to me like, oh, you know, what's wrong with you? And I say, oh, I've got Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, and they're always like, oh, isn't that where you're a bit bendy? And I'm like, well, yes, but so there is a type of EDS called hypermobile EDS, which is the type that I have, and in that type you are generally hypermobile, which means you are quite bendy in certain places. So I can do weird and wonderful things with my joints, but it is so much more than just being bendy. I mean, you get people who are hypermobile who don't have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, and they are just a bit bendy, and it's fine. It's really great, you know, if you're a gymnast or a dancer or something like that, it can actually work to your advantage. But with Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, along with the sort of hypermobility, you get so many other different different syndromes, different symptoms. The bendiness can be very painful. It can cause dislocations and sort of partial dislocations, and some people with different types of EDS don't have that hypermobility. So there are quite a few different types of EDS, and not all of them, I don't think, you necessarily have to be particularly hypermobile to have. So it is definitely, a stereotype that EDS just means you're a bit bendy. I really wish that was the case, but unfortunately it isn't. The next myth is one that I encountered quite a lot when I was kind of going through getting my diagnosis of EDS, and that is that every person with EDS has stretchy skin. So again, if you may have seen, I don't know, photos or videos on YouTube, or I don't know, anything like that, and you will see a fair few people with EDS have extremely stretchy skin, so they can like pull their like neck out, or they can pull their cheeks right out. And yes, this can be a symptom of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. Some people with hypermobile EDS do have stretchy skin. It's more of a sign, I think, of like classical EDS, which is another type of EDS. But as with any kind of illness, not like everybody doesn't have the same symptoms, so not everybody will have the stretchy skin. And when I was like first trying to get my diagnosis, and I saw, I think it was like GPs or sort of local hospital consultants, they would like have a look at my skin, and my skin isn't massively stretchy. It is like, I guess, stretchier than normal, but not to the extent that some people's is. And so they would sort of look at my skin and they'd be like, well, it's not very stretchy, so I don't think you could have EDS. And at the time I kind of thought, oh, okay, that's it then. But then when I sort of went to see sort of more specialist doctors, they said to me, actually, you know, you don't have to have the stretchy skin to have a diagnosis of EDS. They look at a whole sort of, what do you call it, a whole like selection of different symptoms and presentations and history, and you don't have to tick every single box to have it, because with any illness, you know, people are going to have symptoms slightly differently. They might not have something and may have like a different type of sort of presentation. So yeah, definitely not everybody with EDS will have stretchy skin. The next myth is that subluxations and dislocations don't hurt when you have EDS. So subluxations, which I think is how you say it, is kind of like a partial dislocation, and then dislocations are obviously like the full whack. And in a normal healthy person, dislocations are or can be extremely painful, but people seem to think that because when you have EDS you get these dislocations and stuff a lot, it just doesn't hurt, and because you're sort of more bendy and like stretchy and things like that, it just doesn't hurt. And I don't know, there's sort of a myth and a fact here. So I have had some like subluxations and dislocations which haven't really hurt that much, or I haven't even noticed until I've looked. So I guess in some people, some of them, you know, don't cause a huge amount of pain all of the time. Sometimes you could like dislocate the same joint in 2 different times. One time it would be really painful, another time perhaps not. But it doesn't stop people with EDS like feeling pain. I have seen friends dislocate things like shoulders and knees and be in absolute agony, as would a like healthy person. So just because you've got EDS doesn't mean it's not going to hurt when you dislocate something. It may happen more, and it may, you know, cause varying amounts of pain depending on the joint or how often it's dislocating and the type of dislocation and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely not the case that people with EDS don't get pain from their dislocations. The next myth, which I encounter so often, is that you can cure EDS with lifestyle changes, with medication, with psychological intervention, by standing on your head and pouring hot oil over you, by doing all sorts of random things. There is always someone out there who will tell you that they can cure you with some wild and wonderful intervention. And the truth is with EDS is that there is no cure. It is a genetic condition. If there was a cure, I'm pretty sure the doctors would be telling us about it. But it's a lot more complex than that. It is a condition that you are born with. There is a problem with your genetic makeup. Any kind of intervention is not going to cure it. It is not going to get rid of EDS. There are interventions that might help to manage symptoms. So I am on medication for different types of symptoms and problems that help to manage those. I have physiotherapy to try and help manage sort of mobility and things like that. I go for massages because those help to try and manage my pain. What else do I do? All sorts of things like that, but it is management, it's not cure. Anyone that tells you that they will cure you with something, especially if you have to pay for it, please do not believe them, because yeah, there isn't a cure. It's just you know, there's a lot of research going on to look into cures and prevention sort of further down the line, but at the moment there isn't anything. And if there was, people like the EDS UK and doctors would be telling us about it. So I've seen so many people with chronic illnesses get duped by marketing ploys, people telling them that they can cure their illness. And obviously it depends what the illness is, but certainly with EDS, you know, if someone says, oh, if you pay me this much and I'll give you these pills, it will cure it, just please be really wary, because there isn't a cure for EDS. You can't get rid of a genetic condition like this at the moment. So just be careful with the things that you're trying. And yeah, I hate to see people spending money on things that have no scientific backing, have no kind of like, what do you call it? They're not sort of like checked out by medical people, and they're not tested. And it just makes me really sad that people who are vulnerable and who are ill are turning to these things to try and get rid of their illness. I think the best thing you can do with EDS is to manage your symptoms. So work out what the symptoms are that are kind of causing you the problems, and go to your doctor and try and deal with them that way. So, you know, I see gastroenterologists for my digestive problems. I see a POTS specialist for my POTS. I saw a neurologist to help with migraines. And if, you know, conventional doctors can't help, you know, I have nothing against seeing kind of complementary therapists who have training and who have kind of had scientific research go into what they're doing. So, you know, I've had acupuncture, which is now available on the NHS, which I'm more than happy to try, because I know there's a lot of research gone into it. Things like massage and stuff like that, you know, there's research behind as to why it works. So yeah, I would just say to anyone that is looking for a cure for EDS, or that believes that they can cure someone with EDS, just please just be careful and think about it, because yeah, there is no cure at the moment. The next myth is that everyone with EDS has the same symptoms, and again, this is something that I encounter quite regularly, whether that's doctors or other people. You will see someone and they'll be, you know, you'll start talking and they'll be like, so what's wrong with you? Oh, I've got Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. And I'll get, oh, well, I know someone with EDS and they don't use a wheelchair. Or I know someone with EDS and they have to use crutches. Or, oh, I know someone with EDS and they've got a feeding tube, so, you know, you can't have EDS because you don't have the same as them. And I've had that from doctors as well, especially before I got my diagnosis. I was told by a junior doctor that I couldn't possibly have EDS because the people they'd seen with EDS had to have feeding tubes, and I didn't have one at that point. And it's just frustrating, really frustrating, because you look at any illness, whatever that illness is, even like the flu or a cold, you know, two people can have the flu and present in different ways. Two people can have like a cancer and not necessarily have the same symptoms, or have varying degrees of symptoms. So why people think that someone with EDS should have the same symptom as somebody else is quite misinformed, I think. I have quite a few friends who have EDS, and we have things in common, our symptoms in common, but I wouldn't say any of us are exactly the same. We're all individuals anyway. We're all going to experience things differently. Some of us may have more pain than others. Some people may have like more problems with the digestive system. Some people may have more problems with POTS. Some people might have more dislocations than others. It doesn't mean that your EDS, you know, isn't as valid as somebody else's. It's just presents in a different way because you're an individual person. So yeah, please don't be fooled by thinking that everyone with EDS should like present in exactly the same way, because it's just not the case. The next myth that I've heard is that there is a genetic test for every single type of EDS. And this is incorrect. So there are genetic tests for every type of EDS apart from hypermobile EDS, which is the one that I have. So hypermobile EDS is actually the one that is the most common type of EDS, but it is also the type that there is currently no genetic test for. So with all the other types, they have worked out exactly which genes it is that cause or that are related to that type. So people who are kind of going through testing for EDS, they might have genetic testing to rule out other types of EDS, but currently there isn't a test to test for hypermobile EDS. They redid the classification sort of EDS recently, and one of the reasons that they did that was because the doctors thought that I think it used to be called EDS hypermobile type, I can't remember, EDS type something or other, type 3 I think it was, I've gone blank. So it used to be called that, and the diagnostic criteria were a little bit wider, and so a lot more people were getting diagnosed with that, and they actually felt that all of those people didn't necessarily have one type of EDS. So that diagnostic criteria has been changed, which is when the name got changed to hypermobile EDS rather than type 3. And there are also now other sort of spectrums of hypermobility. So there's hypermobile spectrum disorder, which have slightly different symptoms or presentations, and basically they are trying to recategorize people to help them find the gene that is responsible for hypermobile EDS. So that was a bit of a long way of saying it, but basically, yes, there are genetic tests for most of the EDS types, but not for hypermobile type. Okay, so the next myth is that you can only get EDS if one of your parents has it, and I can understand where this myth probably comes from, because EDS is a genetic condition, so it would make sense that you would get it from one of your parents, and yes, that is sometimes the case. So EDS can be passed on. So say I've got EDS, say I were to have a child, they would have a 50% chance of also having EDS. However, you can also get EDS without one of your parents having it. So there are two ways to have EDS. First one is from your parents, but the second one is through a genetic mutation. So when you're conceived and you're kind of forming as a baby in the womb, there can be a mutation which would cause the genetic problem that would result in EDS, and that can happen without either of your parents or anybody in your family having it. I don't think they necessarily know why or how at the moment. It's, again, they're doing a lot of research, but you don't have to have a parent with EDS for you to have EDS. The next myth is that it is easy to get a diagnosis of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, and this could not be further from the truth. So it took me about 25 years to get my diagnosis, and that is not uncommon. So many people that I speak to have gone for years and years and years without a diagnosis. A lot of people, including myself, have been misdiagnosed. They've been ignored by the medical profession. They have been told that their problems are psychological, all sorts of things, because I don't know, EDS just doesn't seem to be very easily diagnosed, and I don't know whether that is because there's not enough education and understanding for like doctors and stuff about it. I mean, a lot of doctors that I see now, you tell them that you've got EDS and they know very, very little about it. I was very lucky that eventually I found a GP who happened to have a friend who had EDS, and that is where my diagnosis kind of started, because she said I had all these symptoms, I had all these problems going on, no one knew what was wrong, and she kind of said, oh, I've got this friend with EDS and you seem very, very similar to her, and that kind of started, like, kicked things off, got me to see the right people. But yeah, people go for years. It's very uncommon, I think, to get a diagnosis of EDS very quickly. I think maybe if you have parents who have EDS, you're more likely to get a diagnosis earlier because there is that genetic link there. But certainly for me, I don't have parents with EDS, and so it was never even considered by most of my doctors. And again, a lot of my doctors had very misinformed views of the symptoms of EDS, how it presents, the type of people that get EDS. And so I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 25. So yeah, it is far from easy to be diagnosed with EDS. I mean, I'm hoping that this will change. The more we speak up about it, the more we talk about it, the more research that's done, the more, you know, doctors that are taught about the signs and the symptoms to look out for, the more people just like, well, the more people like me make videos about it and make it like, you know, make people understand about it. I'm hoping that in years to come, it won't take 25 years, 30 years, 50 years for someone to be diagnosed with it. But certainly at the moment, people go through a hell of a lot before they finally get the answers that they need. And the last myth about EDS is that EDS is not degenerative or life-limiting. And this is a bit of a, I don't know, a tricky one, I think, because it depends what type of EDS that you have. So for example, if you have vascular EDS, that can be life-limiting. People can die very early because of ruptures to blood vessels and organs, and it can be incredibly serious. With hypermobile EDS, it is not classed as life-limiting or degenerative, and I think these terms have quite strict criteria for something to apply to them. So although they're not, EDS isn't classed as those things, it has a lot of characteristics of some of those things. So I guess life-limiting means it limits your life, and I guess generally with hypermobile EDS, EDS specifically doesn't limit your life. Yes, you can get other things happening which then might limit your life, other like related conditions, but the actual EDS doesn't. With regards to it being degenerative, the genetic problem isn't going to get worse, so in that case it isn't degenerative. However, I know myself and a lot of other people, as we've got older, our symptoms are generally getting more and more difficult to manage, and things do seem to be getting worse. So it's not technically degenerative, but your symptoms can get worse over time. And again, this completely depends on each person. Some people don't get worse, some people do, but it's not classed as degenerative or life-limiting. If you've got hypermobile EDS, different types of EDS are slightly different, but the hypermobile EDS isn't classed as those things. But I think it's still important to like realise, and for doctors to realise, that symptoms can progress and you can get worse in that way. I know I know, you know, since from birth to now, my symptoms have got a lot worse, and a lot of other problems have kind of cropped up. So I think it's important to still acknowledge that, even though it's not actually considered a degenerative illness. So that's all the myths and facts that I have got for you today. I really hope you found it interesting and informative, and that it's just kind of raising a bit more awareness of EDS, what it's like, how it affects people, and also challenging some of the kind of stereotypes and stigma around it. If you have enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more from me, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and also click on the bell. That will make sure that you get a notification every time I upload, so that you don't miss anything. And please do leave me a comment, let me know any of your thoughts about EDS. Do you have any questions that you want answers to? Are there any other videos you'd like to see, either about EDS, related illnesses, mental health, physical health, or anything else that's not related to those kind of things? Do let me know, because I'm always looking for ideas, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!